We're combining all the best old school wisdom with all the top new school methods to bring you the optimal way to coach and play the great game of baseball. This is the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass with Coach Bo.
Welcome, coaches, to the 80-20 Baseball Podcast. Man, I'm fired up. Spring is here. The flowers are blooming. The trees are getting their leaves, which is weird for me to say, being from Southern California, because down there they never lose their leaves. But up here in Boise, the trees are getting their leaves, and baseball season is here. It's in full swing. It's great to hear the crowd on the TV and those games, going to the park, seeing these games going on, these baseball players out there, and all the sports out there. Fires me up. So we got that going for us, which is nice. Shout out to my Caddyshack fans. Last week's episode 73 last week, we discussed a 5-step plan. Go back and listen to it if you haven't already. A 5-step plan for motivating teams. It's no gimmicks, no fluff plan that'll work if the effort is put in consistently. We also discussed how catching a Gary Sheffield home run ball highlighted what makes for an ideal catcher's mindset. And the last part of last week's episode, we discussed how an average-sized player that grew up in my hometown won the Southern California Player of the Year award, and we discussed the 3 main things that I believe he did on the field that really contributed the most to him earning that award, and also what we can learn, those 3 things that we can work on our players with to get them better. Now, for today's episode, I got a 2-parter I'm going to share with you here, a really good way to help our hitters make better contact, to square up the baseball more often. And this is something you can do at any level in pretty much any practice environment. And in part 2 today, in this episode, we are going to discuss how many different drills does a coach need to be a successful coach, and how many drills do we need, or how many drills are the optimal amount? What's the optimal amount of drills when it comes to going out there and teaching things in practice? So we're going to break that down right here in part 2 of today's podcast. Man, I'm fired up to be here. And before we jump into part 1, I want to do something that I normally don't do, a little bit different approach to start this, but being episode 74 already, I felt like it might be a good time to give a little bit of my backstory so you know where I'm coming from and what my quote resume unquote looks like. I know it's important when you're listening to somebody for advice and you're listening to somebody to have them kind of guide you in a way that can get you better as a coach. In this particular instance, that's why you're here listening to this. This podcast is designed specifically for youth baseball coaches. Now, you may ask yourself, well, why listen to me? Why listen to anybody? What are their credentials? What gives them some authority to speak on whatever subject it is? In this particular case, it's coaching baseball. First off, I always say this: credentials and titles can be very misleading. I went into the emergency room years ago. I'm a type 1 diabetic. I went into the emergency room years ago, Downey. It's a Kaiser and Downey. And I've had some great experiences with Kaiser. And in fact, I remember in 1995, I got diagnosed. I pretty close to dying. I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I had lost a bunch of weight. I was playing baseball, Pony League baseball, and I was having to go to the bathroom every half inning, not every inning, every half inning. And sometimes I could barely make it. And I was like, man, throw some strikes. I got to go. Now, I never did wet my baseball pants, but there were some times at 14 years old too, you're really conscientious to that. But I had to literally go to the restroom. A 7-inning game, I would be going before the game, after the game, and in between every half inning. So it was probably 15 times total. But I ended up going to the hospital. I remember looking out, the hospital looked out over my Pony League practice field. That was the hardest part. All the nurse coming in, putting a needle in my stomach, a syringe, and saying, I'm going to leave it there until you push the insulin in. We can't let you leave unless you can give yourself your own shots. That was nothing compared to looking out over that baseball field and seeing my Pony League team practicing when I'm hooked up to all this junk in that room. But nonetheless, the experience with the Kaiser at the time and over the years was good. I tell you that to tell you this. I went to the Kaiser in Downey years ago, this is probably like 15 years ago, and I go to the emergency room. I had bottle of insulin had broke. Now I'm on an insulin pump, but at the time I was using bottles and syringes, and the insulin bottle that I had broke, and I had to work until like 8 o'clock at night, and I couldn't just drive home. I lived in California. You just can't drive 30. It's 30, how far do you live? 25 miles. Well, 25 miles in Southern California through LA traffic. It was going to be an hour and 10 minutes one way and an hour and 10 minutes back. That's if there's no accidents. So I said, well, I don't have time to miss this. It was I think it might have been a graduation event. And so I go, well, I'm going to run up to the hospital and get a prescription refill. I needed to get a refill from a doctor, but my doctor, I couldn't get a hold of my endocrinologist. So they said, well, go to the nearest emergency room and get an insulin prescription from the emergency room doctor, or they can just give you a bottle there. So I go in there and the doctor's like telling me there's no such thing as the insulin that I was currently using, Humalog and Novolog. For you diabetics, you know what that is. And I said, well, I need a bottle of Humalog or Novolog. Humalog is the name brand, Novolog is the generic version. And I said, I'd like to get a bottle. And he said, well, no, they don't have those. All it is regular MPH and Lantus. And I said, well, no, they've had this insulin a while. It's been on the market for a while now. And he was a doctor. He wasn't an assistant. He wasn't an intern. He was a full-fledged certified doctor, and he had no idea about Humalog and Novolog. My point of that story is titles can be misleading sometimes. We all know that in life, right? It doesn't just give you, just because you have this title of something, you're the manager of the New York Yankees, thus you know more about baseball than anybody. And that's not how the world works. We all know that. So sometimes these titles can be misleading. But the biggest thing I think we need to ask ourselves when you're listening to somebody, and this goes for everything, and I think a lot of you know exactly where I'm coming from when I say this, does what they're saying add up? Does it add up? So when I'm sharing something with you, does it add up or not add up? All right. If there's red flags going off when I'm telling you this stuff or not, that's a big indicator of, hey, is this something we can go with or not? Now, not everything is going to be something you can just say, oh, that adds up or not, but you can listen to how the consistency over time, over all these podcasts. Also, does it sound logical what I'm sharing here? Does it sound reasonable? Does it sound balanced? Is it a balanced approach? Is it an extreme version? Those are things that I use when I'm listening to people. Does it add up? Does it sound logical? Does it sound reasonable? Did they use deductive reasoning or inductive reasoning? Does it sound balanced? Are they avoiding the extremes, etc.? And then second, everything I'm sharing, I have seen work, whether it was with a team that I was working with, or a program that I was working with, or a team that I played with, or a coach that I played for, or I've seen extremely successful baseball people use it and achieve consistent success over a long period of time. And lastly, a little synopsis on my background. I don't get into this because this is about you coaches getting better, and I don't like to sit here and talk about myself, but I do think it is to have some relatable and also kind of understand where I'm coming from and who I am. One, I was very fortunate to play for my old man in Little League and Pony League. My dad sacrificed to be my baseball coach all the way through Little League and Pony League. And my dad did an excellent job of being a coach that all the kids liked to play for. We won our fair share of games. We definitely won our fair share. We definitely won a lot more than we lost. But my dad, his priority was to make sure every single kid on the team had fun. Every single kid felt valued. I run into guys that I grew up with that played on his team, and the first thing they ask me, it's not about how I'm doing. It's not about how my brother's doing. It's not about how anything else is doing. They don't ask me how my job's going. They ask me how my dad is. How's my dad? How's Coach Bob? And he was the kind of coach that really showed me that you got to care about all your players. But he also didn't let us get away with stuff. His biggest thing was, hey, stop the grab ass. You know, like if you were goofing around and not staying focused, his big thing was, let's stay focused, let's have fun. And every player felt valued. Every player had a role, and he made them feel like they were a valuable part of the team. So that was huge, because that was from 1986, 87, all the way to like 1994. So that was quite a period of time that I got to see my dad do that and learn from that. Secondly, I was also tutored. I was blessed. My parents sacrificed. We didn't have a lot of money growing up, but they sacrificed to get me pitching lessons with two Major League Baseball players. So from the time I was about 9 to the time I was even into high school, I was tutored by John Verhoeven and Don Ossie. Now, John Verhoeven and Don Ossie, Coach Verhoeven and Coach Ossie, had 16 years of Major League experience combined. 16 years. And here I am getting one-on-one lessons with them once a week during the baseball season and before the baseball season. And they were right there working with me. And these were really nice guys. They were really nice guys, and they were relatable, even for being Major League players and just off their Major League careers. Both of them had basically kind of just finished up when they started working with me. And Don Ossie was also an all-star baseball player in the Major League. So I had 16 years of Major League experience working with me one-on-one. And that was really great when it came to pitching and also working with kids and seeing that from a Major League level and kind of the mindset of a Major League player. Now in high school, it got even better. I played high school and college baseball 8 years, 4 high school, 4 college, for 2 different programs, Esperanza High School in Anaheim, California, and Long Beach State. Both programs were coached and led by National Coach of the Year winners, Hall of Fame coaches. For much of the past 20 years, Long Beach State has had the most alumni playing in the major leagues. And in fact, my high school coach is a Hall of Fame coach. My junior year of high school, he was the National Coach of the Year, national for all levels, or for all high schools, all divisions of high school, the National High School Coach of the Year, my junior year of high school. And he's actually been a speaker he goes to these huge ABCA conventions, and he's a speaker at the ABCA convention. And if you're a speaker at the ABCA convention, you've had a lot of success in your career as a coach. So I had it really good. good. 8 years of just phenomenal coaching at Esperanza High and then Long Beach State. In high school and in college, I was also very fortunate. I don't know any other player that I've ever met that got to have the godfather of baseball's mental game, Ken Revisa, work with them in high school and college. My high school coach, Mike Curran, Coach Curran, brought Ken Revisa into our high school, and I remember meeting in his room, which was like a portable, and here he was talking to us. And at the time, I knew about him. I got the original version of the Ken Revisa Heads Up Baseball, which is kind of the Bible of the mental game of baseball. And Ken Revisa worked with the Olympic team. He worked with the major league teams, the Dodgers, Angels. He worked with pretty much anybody that was anybody in Major League Baseball. And now Ken recently passed away, and it's a very big loss to the baseball community. But his tutorial tree that he mentored of coaches that have branched off is all throughout baseball. And I was fortunate to get almost 5 years, I would say 4.5 years of heavily influenced mentoring by him. And man, oh man, what a blessing. And that's helped me all through life. And I share that here in certain ways. I've put that into our game, into our strategies, our system that we talk about here at 80/20 Baseball. I also played 3 years in the Alaska Baseball League. So I played 3 straight summers for some great coaches with many major league players. Anybody who knows the ABL, the Alaska Baseball League, is one of the premier summer league baseball college summer leagues. I played up there for 3 straight summers. 2 times we went to Wichita for the college baseball summer World Series. Had a blast, had some great memories, some great teammates. I was drafted twice by the Major League Baseball teams. I got drafted so long ago was by the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. Now they're just the Tampa Bay Rays. And then I was drafted by the Cleveland Indians. Played parts of 3 seasons in the minor leagues with the Indians. And then I got into coaching so fast. I was actually already coaching before I started coaching, while I was still playing. I would coach in the offseason. I coached in the offseason for a couple different teams. The second year I coached at Long Beach Wilson, who 3 years later, some of those players were freshmen when I was coaching there. 3 years later, they won the national championship, the high school national championship. I helped coach their winter ball team back then in California. You couldn't coach your own team and your high school team. If you were a high school coach, you couldn't coach your team in the fall or winter for games. You could work with them during like PE class, but you couldn't actually work with them. So they hired me. So as soon as I got done playing, I was driving back. In fact, I called my old high school baseball coach, Mike Curran, Hall of Fame coach, said, "Hey, I'm looking for a gig, and I heard you're looking for a pitching coach." And that was that. So I got in full time at that point. I was lucky enough to get National Pitching Association certified. So some of you that are on Twitter a lot, you're going to see Tom House. Tom House is a big presence. I remember using Tom House's stuff so long ago that you would actually have to be like in the back room and say like, "Hey, are you a house guy? Because he used to get a lot of heat, a lot of people. He was like ahead of his time. So he got a lot of heat from a lot of coaches. And Tom House he's come out, and I even tweeted him the other day. And I said, "Hey, it's great to see you out. It's finally great to see the baseball world kind of recognizing and understanding where you're coming from." I don't agree with everything Coach House says or how he coaches everything, but I do think he was ahead of his time, and he's like the perfect Twitter guy because he's a great one-hit, like one-liner, two-liner kind of guy. He's funny, really intelligent, and he cares about the game, and he wants the game to get better. So I was national coaching certified, which is a pretty big deal. Had to go to USC, University of Southern California, for like 4 straight days, and that was a big deal, getting certified and really getting mentored in a small group. I've attended many hours from the ABCA, the American Baseball Coaching Association coaching convention, all the way from Chicago to Orlando and back to Anaheim a couple times. I've coached players from the 7U all the way up to the major league level. And I think what also, now to top it off, the last thing here, what I think is a huge deal that separates, I really feel separates my message from others, and not completely, but definitely I think it kind of gives me a different angle, is I taught 12 full years in the inner city of LA. Teenagers from Watts, Compton, North Long Beach, Paramount. I taught PE most of the time. I did teach some health education courses, but I taught a lot of PE. So I ran classes that at some points had 105 students one time. Yeah, I had 105. Now I had to sign off because the state had rules on how many students could be in there. It was a summer class, a 6-week summer class, a PE class. That was a 5-hour class, and I had 105 students because I kept signing off. Yeah, bring them in. I always told the counselors, I said, I can't help students if they're not in my class. And they kept telling me I was crazy because this class included many gang members. It was definitely very different ends. You had kids. I mean, I remember going one point talking to a real nice kid. He was autistic, really far on the autistic scale. And I'd have a conversation with him, have a good time, get him going on. And then I would turn around and I'd be working with 2 guys that were basically gang members that were in opposing gangs. They were rival gang members. And so I had to work with them to get them kind of to get along, which is a whole nother dynamic. It's not like the movies. It's not as pretty as the movies make it seem. Also, I organized some tryouts with the same group, the same area, South Central kids, that I organized a tryouts. I got 75 high school freshmen to come out and try out. About 14 years ago, I got 75 high school freshmen to come out and attend a tryout. When I got to that school, there was only 6 players that came out for the freshman team. 6. We had to drop down sophomores just to have a freshman team. 2 years later, I took a hold of the tryouts and I had 75 high school freshmen out there. The team was 25 deep, and the program got going with a lot more kids were staying off the streets and things like that. So I worked with these inner city kids 12 straight years, where there's a lot of coaches that are sharing information out there that are really good on the skills. But when it comes to running a team and running and connecting with people, either you did it right and you did what worked, where I was working for those 12 years over 2,000 days, or you got run out. It wasn't theory. It wasn't textbook stuff. It was like, this works and it doesn't work. And you found out real quick. And trust me, I found out real fast, because I did not have a good time early on. I struggled, but I got there and I figured it out because I was just honest with myself, and I had great mentors, people from that area, grew up in that area, that mentored me, some older 60, 70-year-old teachers that were on their way out, but they were sharing their information with me. And basically, it really helped me kind of understand how to work with players, how to work with kids, how to work with young adults. And that really gave me a huge advantage when I got in, as I started progressing my coaching. So that there is where I'm coming from. And I promise I'm not going to get back into this hopefully ever again. I just wanted to kind of put that out there. So those of you that are listening are like, okay, what's his backstory? What's Coach Bo's backstory? Oh yeah, and another thing is, the reason I go by Coach Bo is my last name, Asherbranner. Asherbranner, now working with students over the years in the classroom, I'd go by Mr. A, but Asherbranner is a long name. It's like 10 letters, 4 syllables. So they just went by Coach Bo, and Coach Bo kind of have a nice ring to it. So when I first started coaching years ago, I just would come out and I was like, yeah, I'm Coach Asherbranner. And eventually the other coaches were like, hey, we're going to shorten it down Coach Bo. So that's why I go by Coach Bo. The last name gets a little long and tedious. All right, now for the drill that I'd like to share with you that I think is very, very, very useful. And it can take different forms. It can look differently depending on how many players are doing it at the same time, or if you have it as a station in a batting practice sequence, or if it's just training. You can do it different ways. You can do it how it best fits into your practices or into your training routine. Here's how it goes. This drill is specific to getting your hitters to square up the ball more often. I recommend you do not coach your players, your hitters, your batters to be, quote, contact hitters, just contact hitters, trying just to put the ball in play, especially with less than 2 strikes. You want them to do some damage on that ball. You want them to drive that ball. The outfield is much bigger. It's a much bigger area to cover. Yet there's only 3 outfielders and there's 4 infielders, plus a pitcher making 5 really, and the catcher that can get balls around the front of the infield area, in front of the home plate area. You have 3 outfielders to cover a lot of area. Now the infielders, sure, they can go out into the outfield a little bit, but if you drive a ball into the outfield, the infielders are not going to have any play on it. And you really are looking to drive into the outfield because there's a lot more ground to cover and fewer defenders out there. But the hitters must first make contact. They must square up the ball. So there needs to be some hand-eye coordination here in play to get this done. So you do need to make contact, of course, but you also want to make contact with some power. This particular drill, this particular thing we're training right now is making it harder, making a drill harder than the game. And this can look a lot of different ways. And I'm going to share those different ways right now. This drill is to make making contact more difficult for a hitter. So when they get in the game and they're using a regular size baseball bat, their regulation bat and a regulation baseball, they are going to have a much easier time because their training has trained them to use a smaller bat, a smaller implement, a smaller piece of equipment to hit a baseball. And I recommend using golf wiffle balls or those smaller baseballs that are a little bit bigger than golf balls. And they sell them. They sell miniature baseballs made out of leather with seams and everything. And they also sell wiffle golf balls, and you can get a ton of those for really cheap. Now, the trade-off with using anything wiffle is it's not going to have the same flight characteristics as a baseball. And also when you hit a wiffle, there's not much resistance. And when you hit a baseball, there's going to be resistance. So it's not completely authentic. So here's what you can do. Here's what I recommend. I recommend you invest in those smaller baseballs, and you can find those online. And those baseballs, these smaller baseballs, are sold by Rawlings, Jugs, Skills. Those companies all sell them at Dick's Sporting Goods, online, Amazon. Small training baseballs. I recommend you get as many of these as you can. Get a bucket full. I like the wiffles because when you hit a wiffle, it doesn't go very far. So it keeps the collection process much more efficient. The trade-off is when you're hitting a wiffle golf ball, not a wiffle baseball, a wiffle golf ball, because it's much smaller, it doesn't give that resistance. It doesn't give the authentic kind of, you have to drive through the pitch. And as you're facing pitchers that throw harder, you have to kind of drive through the pitch so you have some power on that. But for contact purposes, I love training with a smaller piece of equipment, such as just as basic like a cheap cheap, like 1-inch dowel. Maybe you get a 2.5 foot, 1-inch dowel, basically a 30-inch, 2-inch in diameter dowel that you can get at Home Depot. You can get 12 of those. You can get maybe a few of those. Maybe you tape them up. They also sell bats that are thinner bats, training bats. Those are a little more expensive, but they're more authentic. They do sell bats out there online that actually have the regulation size grip handle, but they have a skinnier barrel. I love this idea. I really, really, really like this idea. You could even just use bottle caps. In fact, I got this idea years ago from reading about Dominican players that would use little rocks, broom handles, and they would use bottle caps. So they wouldn't even use equipment you could buy at the sporting goods store. They would just use stuff that was the broom from an old broom handle, or bottle caps, or rocks, things that were essentially free or just being reused. You could do it that way. Absolutely. If you can afford it, get some of those miniature baseballs, get a whole bucket full, and also a big bag of the wiffle miniature golf balls, and use those during practice. Now, you can use those with the regulation bat, of course, but that's halfway to where I'd like to see you get with this. What you're doing is training that really keen focus. You're really training your players to focus and really have to square up the baseball, because the margin of error obviously is much, much smaller. They don't have as much margin of error. They really got to square it up. Now, on both sides is a smaller implement, a smaller ball coming in, and a smaller bat. Ideally, you would get a bat, a skinnier barreled version of a bat that's the same length or very close to the same length as the game bat that your players are using, or that player's using, and also a similar weight. So if you could get a training bat that has a handle that's the same size as the regulation bat, the same length on the bat. A good one is a Yugo Pro Baseball. They sell one. It's called a Better Bat Skinny Barrel Training Bat. I don't get compensated by any of these, but these prices, these are really awesome things, but these prices, like the one they have here on the Better Bat, it's a Better Bat Skinny Barrel Training Bat. It's $150. I mean, if you can afford it, yeah, do it, but you can also probably make this yourself. I do like the idea of getting the handle the same size or similar. You can use athletic tape to build up a handle on something that's not a bat. And I like the idea of the length being similar, because when you swing it, the leverage of it's going to feel more normal to the game. If you can do something like this, if you can get creative and make some of these, it doesn't have to be perfect. The more you can have, the better. If you could have it as part of a hitting station, maybe you only need 2. You have 4 players in the group. One is throwing, or I should say 2 of them are throwing and 2 of them are hitting, maybe in the cages or down the line or into a fence. I prefer everything to be overhand throwing if possible. That's just my opinion. I know there's a lot of hitting coaches out there that like the underhand. I don't like training things that don't mimic a game. And I haven't seen a youth pitcher throw underhand ever. And I haven't seen a high school pitcher throw underhand. You see some submarine pitchers from time to time, but very few and far between. I recommend that ball come down. Now, the average pitch is coming down. For example, here's the math on that. The average pitch is coming down at an 8-degree angle. The average pitch is coming down at an 8-degree angle. Now that's going to be more on a breaking ball, say a 12-6 breaking ball, and less if the player's throwing really hard and shorter, a pitcher that's shorter. But you got a downward angle on a game pitch. You have a downward angle as it's coming in, an incoming angle that's downward. So I don't really like the underhand. I know there's coaches, a lot of you are listening to this right now, that you do this, your teams do this. I'm not a big fan of that. I like short toss. I love short toss. Get behind a screen, get behind an L screen, get behind a big square screen and do that. I like that, but to me, it's always overhand. And I also think even short toss like that should have multiple pitches, even though your breaking balls and changeups from short distances aren't going to do what they normally would do. But I like throwing the hitter, throwing their timing off a little bit, and also throwing the angles, the pitch angles, and how they're coming into spins and making those different. Because in the game, the opposing pitcher is not just going to be piping them and telling them, here comes a fastball, here comes a straight ball. They're going to be throwing everything in the kitchen sink, and you got to be ready for it. So I like this idea of using skinnier type of barrels. I highly recommend using this approach, not as your entire batting practice, of course, but as a part of it, as part of your training. And I think using the wiffle golf balls and the miniature baseballs is a no-brainer. Definitely recommend that. In fact, you could even throw some of those miniature baseballs in there during batting practice. Maybe every 5th one is a miniature baseball. The challenge on that isn't so much hitting it as much as it is throwing. Trying to throw those miniature baseballs is a little bit of a challenge from like the mound distance. Up close is a little different, but especially you guys with bigger hands, adult hands, it's going to be a little harder to throw them at a longer distance. You can do it. It just presents a little bit of a challenge. So a skinny barrel with a small baseball or a small type of ball, make the contact harder to come by for your players. Make it more difficult. This is a great thing to add. This should be at a minimum a station in your batting practice routine, or maybe the introductory part, the warm-up part to your batting practice routine. One recommendation or one tip to get your team more equipment and spread the cost around is to have all of the players' parents, if you're coaching youth ball, even high school, everybody pitches in, and they pitch in, say, you tell them we're going to buy 50 of these miniature baseballs, we're going to buy 50 of these wiffle balls, and we're going to buy 2 of these skinny training bats, and you tell them this is going to be team equipment. So at the beginning of the year, earlier in the year, this is much easier to do because you're selling the parents on the fact that you're going to be utilizing this equipment. And you can do this with everything that you're trying to do when it comes to equipment. You can tell the parents and say, hey, I really want to buy X, Y, and Z for the team to train with at each practice. Now, if everybody pitches in, say, $15, we can get this no problem, or $10 or $20, depending on how much or what you're buying. And then you can also have it down where you can say, at the end of the season, we're going to do a raffle. Now, some of the teams roll over to the next season, so it can just roll over. The equipment can just roll right over with the team and you can continue using it. Or you could say at the end of the season, we're going to have a raffle for these training bats, or we're going to have a raffle for these miniature baseballs. It spreads out the cost, it keeps it fair, and you can also distribute them at the end of the season rather than like having the team buy a bunch of stuff and then the head coach is the one who gets to take it home at the end of the season. To me, it's more like, let's spread this out. Let's make it fair. If they're all pitching in, then they should have equal opportunity to get some of that back, or have an equal opportunity to have their name drawn out of a hat. So little Johnny can go use it during his offseason program or the next year if he plays for another team. So there was part one, something that should be definitely a part of getting your hitters to make more consistent contact. And now, sticking with the drill topic, part 2. This is for every single part of the game, not just hitting, not just making contact. This is for every single part of your coaching game. Have fewer drills. I've touched on this a little before. This is important. There's a couple reasons why. Less is more, yada, 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 sure. But why? Well, first off, it's easier to set up drills when your players know what the drill is. Setting it up, explaining it, and getting into the drill, getting it started. So getting a drill started is much faster when the team is familiar with the drill, from the setup to the instruction to how the drill operates and functions. Once the players go through it 1 or 2 times, they know how to set it up. They know where to be. You can simply yell out the name of the drill and boom, they know where to go. They know what equipment they need. They know how to help set it up. Many hands make light work. And if they're all on the same page, they know exactly how to get that drill going. They know the expectations of that drill already. So it's less time explaining out the drill, the purpose, the reason why, and the player buy-in, where to be, how it works, safety issues and concerns that might come up. When players get more familiar with drills, then they just operate much faster and much more efficiently. Secondly, if you have your best ground ball drill or your best hitting drill or pitching drill, your best drill, you should probably not defer and allocate time to other lesser quality drills, right? So not all drills can be just compared, one-to-one, but sometimes you just have better drills for certain things. Why waste time doing a drill that's of lesser quality? In fact, I've gone a whole youth baseball season coaching teams. I was coaching 2 teams simultaneously, and I went the entire season using one drill for every single thing. We did the same dynamic warm-up, the same throwing routine, the same throwing drill, the same ground ball drill, the same base running drill, the same outfield drill, the same relay cutoff drill, the same hitting drills, the same pitching drills. When I design the drill, I design it pretty much covers all the bases, no pun intended, and it's very authentic. It covers those 8 steps that I talk about in the drill mastery guide. And so there's no reason for me to go to like a lesser drill. It does cover everything. I don't need supplemental drills to cover things that might not get covered in the main drill. I like drills that cover all the aspects of, say, ground balls. I don't have a chopper ground ball drill and a line drive 1-hopper ground ball drill and a backhanded ground ball drill and a charge and flip ground ball drill. That's all put into one. I don't have a double play ground ball drill or a throw it home ground ball drill. That's all built into the ground ball drill, the mass ground ball, mass fungo ground ball drill. And using just those, both those teams finished in first place, had a lot of success, a lot of fun, and they never got burned out because in youth baseball, you're not practicing every day. So when you have, say, 8 main drills to cover the 8 main things, then you can use 4 one day or 3 one day or 2 one practice and then rotate through. You don't have to use them at each practice. Now, pitching and hitting, you're going to use way more often. Fielding ground balls, you're going to use more often. Things like relays, outfield, fly balls might be a little bit fewer and further between. But the message of this part 2 of this podcast is have fewer drills. You don't need a plethora of drills to be a successful coach. Just have one kick butt drill for ground balls. Have one kick butt. Work in bunts, work in backhand, work in choppers, work in hard shots, work in the incredible where you're hitting some harder, work in different things and master that drill. Get the most out of that drill. Optimize that drill. Make that drill well-rounded where it covers the different parts of, say, said component of baseball and then get really good at it. Just have fewer drills. I think you should have no more. Personally, I think you should have no more than 3 at the most for any particular component of baseball that you're training. I think 2 is ideal. If you can get to 2, that's usually just perfect. 3 would be for college coaches, high school coaches, definitely professional coaches, because not that they need it. It's more so, it's not that they need it to get the skills better. It's more so they just don't, the players don't burn out because they're out there every single day. So have fewer drills. It helps with less time setting up. That's the biggest thing. Like getting into the drills is so much faster. All the players know exactly where to be, what equipment's needed, where to put the buckets, what do they need, a glove, helmet, this, that, where do they line up, where do they set up? You can get right into the drill. They know your expectations. That doesn't mean you don't keep coaching. That doesn't mean you don't reiterate the purpose, the goal, the main goal of the drill, or the encouragement that you might want to share with them before you start. But it allows you to cut out the talking, because the talking really doesn't get players better that much. Even you coaches that are just amazing with your words, it's not nearly as effective as getting them in and getting quality reps efficiently, getting quality reps in, and getting into the drill much faster is big. That's a huge thing. So having fewer drills, less explaining, hey, we're going to do this drill today. Now it might take you 10 minutes, 5 minutes just to explain the drill and get it set up. And then once the drill is going, you usually got to stop and pause it and explain some things from there. And by no means, if you just have one drill, doesn't mean you're not going to have to pause the drill from time to time and explain to the kids something that you want them to get out of the drill a little bit better, or something that they're doing wrong with the drill or whatnot. Now, I'll finish up by saying this. I know some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, Coach Bo, the variety, having a multitude of drills, variety to kind of go through a bunch of drills and not have to keep using the same drills, isn't that going to be more fun for the players? I've found that for youth baseball, you don't need a whole bunch to keep the variety fresh, because they're not practicing more than 2 to 3 times a week. And 2, if you create 1 or 2 really kick butt drills, if you design 2 or 1 really awesome drill, fast-paced, efficient, and action-packed drill, then the players are going to have fun. They're moving, they're having fun. It's when you have 1 drill and it sucks, or 1 drill and it's boring, or 1 drill and it's just slow, which is boring, or 1 drill that's very one-dimensional or has no competition component. Yeah, then you're going to run into issues. Players are not going to have as much fun. But if you have 1 or 2 really kick butt drills, some competitions built in, variety built in within the drill, authentic, efficient, action-packed, moving, quick, quality rep after quality rep for all your players, then you don't need more than 1 or 2 drills for any particular component of the game. All right, to wrap up, I gave you a little background on myself. I won't do that anytime soon again. I just want to give you some background on myself. This is, I trust me, I know this podcast is about what I can get to you, and it's about you all getting better as coaches and us working together. But I just want to put that out there. So some of you have joined on recently. I see the numbers going up every week, so I know there's new coaches listening. It gives you a little background into why me, why listen to me, why am I any different than anybody else? And that's the story. I kind of try to keep it as short as possible, but you're talking 35 years of baseball. I try to get in there in about 10 minutes. So part 1, we talked about using a skinnier piece of equipment, a skinny bat, skinny training bat, some kind of wooden dowel, a pipe, as long as you're doing it safely and it's sturdy and strong, and trying to use something that's about the same length as a regulation bat, handle about the same size, and the weight similar size. That's the ideal optimal goal of that. And then using miniature baseballs, they sell those all over the internet and at certain sporting goods stores, and those wiffle golf balls, they sell those at any golf shop, and you might even have some. But I definitely think you should bulk up on those in terms of getting more and having a whole bucket full, because remember, when you're picking up stuff, when you're collecting baseballs, you're not getting better. You're not getting better. You're just getting the players' backs a little stronger, maybe their hamstrings. That's it. And that's really not going to pay off very much come season. And you want them to get better. When they're at practice, they want to get better. And there's a reason baseball players started shooting baskets because picking up baseballs and picking up equipment, especially baseballs off the ground, is just like tedious and boring. So every player, every little kid just started chucking them up like he was a basketball player to make it fun, because it's boring. So make it where they don't have to do that as often, and have a full bucket of wiffle balls instead of just a third of a bucket. Spend the money, get the team involved, have everybody pitch in, do the raffle at the end of the season to give that away, or just distribute out an even amount amongst the players and say, hey, you can use these in your off-season training and whatnot. In part 2, we talked about having fewer drills. We just talked about this, having fewer drills. drills, less time to set up, less time to explain it. You get into the drill faster, you get to the quality reps faster without having to have this huge introduction. You do the introduction once early in the season, you touch up on it, you continue to touch it up and fine tune it and optimize it, but you will spend much less time doing it that way. All right, next week, I'll see you in episode 75 next Tuesday. And in that episode next week, we're going to talk about how to keep your bench players, your players that are not in the game, how to keep them. I'm going to share some recommendations to keep them sharp and loose throughout the game as best as possible so they're ready when they need to come in physically and mentally. And we'll also discuss a fun game that you can do with your team that builds throwing accuracy, something that you can actually build in to your throwing routine that you do towards the beginning of practice. This is a throwing routine competition that makes throwing accuracy the priority, and it makes it fun for the players. And there's instant feedback. It's easy to keep score. And I'm going to share that with you. We'll discuss that next week in episode 75. And until then, take care of yourselves, take care of your health so you can take care of your families, your kids, your loved ones, your friends, and take this information that we talked about here, that we discussed here, take it out to the field, put it in. It's not going to be perfect right away. There's going to be a learning curve. There's going to be some, learning steps along the way. Progress is going to be made slowly sometimes, faster sometimes. Go out there, put this into your routine, and I guarantee you'll have more and more success as you do it. Love being here with you guys. I'll see you next week on episode 75. Take care.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.